uncovered the dark truth behind Song Joong-ki and Song Hye Kyo divorce. What if everything you thought you knew about the most iconic K-drama marriage was only the surface of a much deeper, carefully hidden story? What if the real reason behind Song Joong-ki and Song Hye Kyo's divorce was never fully spoken out loud, not because it was scandalous, but because it was far more complicated, more human, and more unsettling than fans were prepared to accept? Because years after their sudden split, one question still refuses to disappear. Hold on tight, the world of your favorite celebrities is unfolding before your eyes, and every moment is more breathtaking than the last. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Why did a love that looked unbreakable end so fast, so quietly, and with so many unanswered gaps? Tonight, we are not here to spread rumors. We are here to slow everything down, to rewind the timeline, to examine what was said, what was never said, and what might have been hidden in plain sight all along. And trust me, you may think you know this story already. But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. It all began as a modern fairy tale. When Song Joong-ki and Song Hye Kyo starred together in Descendants of the Sun, the world didn't just watch a drama. It watched chemistry so intense it felt unscripted. Every glance lingered. Every smile felt private. Fans didn't need confirmation because they believed they could feel the truth through the screen. When their real-life relationship was finally confirmed, it felt less like celebrity news and more like destiny catching up to reality. Their wedding in 2017 was not loud. It was elegant. Carefully curated. A ceremony that felt symbolic rather than flashy, as if both stars wanted to protect something sacred from the noise of fame. At the time, many praised them for choosing privacy over spectacle. But looking back now, that choice carries a different weight. Because just under 2 years later, everything collapsed. In June 2019, the divorce announcement came without warning. No build-up. No public tension. No scandal exposed beforehand. One short statement from Song Joong-ki's side. A few carefully chosen words from Song Hye Kyo later. And then silence. That silence is where the dark truth begins to take shape. Here's the first uncomfortable detail many people overlook. The divorce was initiated unilaterally. Song Joong-ki filed first, and he did so through legal representatives, not jointly. In the world of celebrity divorces, this matters. It immediately signaled that something had broken down beyond repair, and that reconciliation was no longer on the table. Even more striking was his request for the process to be handled quietly, without public blame. On the surface, it sounded respectful. But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. Almost immediately after the filing, reports began to contradict each other. Different outlets hinted at different causes. Lifestyle differences. Personality clashes. Conflicting values about marriage. But no single explanation ever stuck, because neither side confirmed anything concrete. And when stories refuse to settle, it's usually because the truth doesn't fit neatly into a headline. Let's talk about timing. In the months leading up to the divorce, Song Joong-ki had been spending extended periods overseas for filming. Song Hye Kyo, on the other hand, was increasingly selective about her projects, choosing work that allowed her more stability. On paper, this looks like a simple case of two successful people growing in different directions. But relationships don't fall apart overnight just because of schedules. What began to unsettle fans was how suddenly all shared public appearances stopped. No casual sightings. No joint events. No subtle signs of togetherness that celebrities often maintain even during rough patches. It was as if a wall had gone up instantly. That kind of emotional distance doesn't happen in a moment. It builds quietly. And this is where the story turns darker, not in scandal, but in emotional reality. Sources close to the industry later suggested that the marriage struggled under the weight of expectations. Not just public expectations, but internal ones. When two people are constantly described as perfect, any flaw feels like failure. Any disagreement feels amplified. Any silence feels dangerous. Imagine carrying not just your own relationship, but the fantasies of millions. But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. After the divorce, Song Hye Kyo made a choice that shocked many observers. She did not rush to defend herself. She did not leak counter-narratives. She did not explain her pain. Instead, she retreated. She disappeared from interviews. She let the public speculate while she rebuilt quietly. For someone who had been under scrutiny since her teenage years, this silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Song Joong-ki also moved on in ways that raised questions. He returned to work quickly. He avoided discussing the marriage in detail. When he did speak later, years later, his words were calm, reflective, and deliberately vague. No accusations. No bitterness. And that is precisely what made people uneasy. Because when a relationship ends without blame, it often means both sides are protecting something bigger than pride. Here's another detail rarely discussed. In Korean culture, divorce still carries stigma, especially for women. Yet Hye Kyo never positioned herself as a victim. She never used sympathy as a shield. Instead, she focused on growth, maturity, and self-reflection in her later interviews. She spoke about learning to be alone. About understanding herself more deeply. Those are not the words of someone escaping scandal. Those are the words of someone who endured something deeply personal. Years after the divorce, both actors' lives moved forward, but never recklessly. Song Joong-ki eventually remarried and embraced fatherhood, presenting himself to the public not as a man escaping his past, but as someone who had finally found a rhythm that matched the life he wanted. Hye Kyo, on the other hand, chose a different kind of evolution. She did not rush into public romance. She did not rewrite her image overnight. Instead, she leaned into stillness, into craft, into solitude. And that contrast is important. Because if this divorce had been fueled by betrayal, bitterness, or explosive wrongdoing, the aftermath would have looked very different. There would have been leaks. Friends speaking off the record. Carefully planted stories to sway public opinion. But none of that truly happened. What emerged instead was something far quieter and far more unsettling. Mutual restraint. But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. In the entertainment industry, silence is rarely accidental. Silence is negotiated. Silence is chosen. Silence often exists because speaking would cause more harm than healing. So what were they protecting? Industry insiders have long hinted that the core issue was not a single event, but a slow realization. A realization that the versions of themselves who fell in love were not the same people who stood at the altar. Fame had reshaped them differently. Marriage demanded compromises neither had fully anticipated. And the pressure to maintain a flawless image left little room for vulnerability. When problems arose, they could not be processed privately. Every move was watched. Every absence noticed. Every expression analyzed. Imagine trying to fix a fragile relationship while millions of strangers believe it should already be perfect. That kind of pressure doesn't just strain love. It suffocates it. But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. One of the most telling moments came long after the divorce, when Hye Kyo spoke about love without ever mentioning Song Joong-ki's name. She described love as something that should feel peaceful, not performative. Something that should allow you to breathe. Something that should not require you to disappear inside someone else's expectations. Those words landed quietly, but they hit hard. Because they suggested that the marriage may not have been toxic or dramatic, but misaligned. Two good people walking forward together, only to realize they were heading toward different destinations. And sometimes, that truth hurts more than betrayal. Another rarely discussed layer is control. Not control over each other, but over narrative. From the very beginning, their relationship was framed as legendary. The nation's couple. A symbol of hope. A fantasy made real. That label followed them everywhere, leaving no space for ordinary marital struggles. How do you admit you are unhappy when the world insists you are perfect? How do you ask for help when doing so might shatter an image larger than both of you? But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. When the divorce news broke, the public reaction was not anger. It was disbelief. Fans searched for villains because it felt easier than accepting a quieter truth. That sometimes love doesn't fail because someone did something wrong. Sometimes it fails because timing, growth, and emotional needs stop aligning. And that reality is terrifying. Because it means no one is immune. Not beauty. Not fame. Not success. Not even a love story born from one of the most romantic dramas ever made. In the years since, both Song Joong-ki and Hye Kyo have carried themselves with remarkable restraint. They do not speak poorly of each other. They do not rewrite history. They allow the past to exist without constantly reopening it. That restraint suggests respect. And respect, even after separation, tells us something important. This was not a war. It was a quiet surrender. A decision made not to destroy, but to preserve what dignity remained. A recognition that staying together might have caused deeper wounds than letting go. But wait. Here's where it gets crazy. The darkest truth behind their divorce may not be scandal at all. It may be the realization that love alone is not always enough. That compatibility evolves. That people grow in directions they cannot predict. That marriage is not the end of a story, but the beginning of challenges far more complex than romance. And perhaps the reason this story still haunts so many people is because it mirrors a fear we all share. If something that beautiful can end quietly, without drama, without villains, without closure, then what does that say about certainty itself? Maybe the real mystery was never what broke them apart. Maybe the real truth is that they were brave enough to walk away before they lost themselves completely. And that is not a scandal. That is a tragedy of timing. A love that was real. A marriage that tried. And a farewell that chose silence over destruction. And even now, years later, as fans continue to ask what really happened, one thing remains painfully clear. Some truths are not dark because they are shocking. They are dark because they are honest. And honesty, when stripped of fantasy, can be the hardest thing of all to accept.